We talk a lot about celebrities and famous people who have had scoliosis and what they did to manage that. One that you may know or may not know about is General Douglas MacArthur, who was a general in the US military. And I want to share three things that I learned from reading his story that helped him to fix his scoliosis. He actually did a great job at reducing his scoliosis curve. And I wanted to share those with you. And the third thing is the most important thing, and I want to make sure that you get that because it can really help to improve your scoliosis. If you're someone who has scoliosis and you're looking for some inspiration in doing the things that will help your scoliosis the most, this is a great story. So let's dive into it. Let's talk a little bit about General Douglas MacArthur first, and then I'll get into the three things that I learned from his story. So General Douglas MacArthur was born in 1880, which was 100 years before I was born. So this was a while ago. His dad was in the military, and he was a Medal of Honor recipient. His dad's name was Arthur MacArthur. And so General MacArthur was raised on military bases and things like that because his dad was in the military. And what General MacArthur was known the most for is World War II and the Korean War. So he earned the rank of General of the Army, which only 5 people in history have earned. So he was really high up in that. He fought in World War I. He was a general and had a lot of different titles in World War II, and he's very famous for what he did in the South Pacific and World War II. So pretty amazing guy, pretty amazing military person, and he was very driven. His mother was actually also very driven in him becoming successful in the military. So that's a little bit about who he was. He was very athletic. He was very good at sports and things like that. So when I was looking at what his scoliosis story was, I went to, it's called What Greater Honor. It's a book that is about Douglas MacArthur that details kind of his whole life. And I pulled out the piece that is specific to scoliosis. So that's pages 25 through 33 in that book if you want to look it up. And what it talks about is when he went to get entry into West Point, getting entry into West Point, he had to do a written exam, which he passed with flying colors. And then he just had to pass the physical exam, which he thought, this is going to be a piece of cake. I've been active my whole life. I do sports. I haven't had any problems. But when he went in to get his physical as part of that examination, they found that he had scoliosis. And the doctor actually failed him in his entrance to West Point because he had scoliosis. So it must have been a fairly significant degree. Especially back then, they weren't testing for scoliosis quite as specific as we are. And so his doctor failed him in that exam, which is kind of crazy and very disappointing for General MacArthur at the time. So he was very discouraged, and he told his mom, and his mom was like, we're not having this. We are going to treat this scoliosis and get it better, and you're gonna reapply the next year. So they made an appointment to see a Dr. Franz Pfister, a well-respected surgeon in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So they went to see Dr. Pfister. I don't know what training Dr. Pfister has. I mean, it sounds like he was an orthopedic surgeon, but beyond that, I don't know if he had any training in scoliosis exercise. At that time, the Schroth method hadn't been developed. The Sees method hadn't been developed. So they were kind of just figuring things out. Dr. Pfister developed a program that Douglas MacArthur did on a daily basis for the rest of that year. So he worked very closely. I think he did exercises every day. He followed the instructions of Dr. Pfister, and I think he saw Dr. Pfister fairly frequently for stretching and strengthening. He had him lift weights and things like that. So he worked him, and I think what he did is he developed a program based on what he was seeing with the scoliosis. So after a year, General MacArthur went back to take his entrance exam. Again, it was just the physical portion, and again, he failed the exam. He failed the physical exam because of his scoliosis, but the person doing the test said, your spine looks better than it did last year, but it's not quite to the point where we can pass you to do to get into West Point. And so he was encouraged that he had seen progress with his spine and that it was looking better, but it wasn't quite there. So he doubled down on his efforts, and he worked with Dr. Pfister again, and he worked daily because his goal was to be able to get into West Point, and he had to have as straight of a spine as possible to get into West Point. So he lifted the weights, he did his stretches, he worked with Dr. Pfister, and then the following year he reapplied. I guess this was the last year he was able or eligible to enter West Point, and he went into the physical examination, and he had worked hard enough and progressed enough that he didn't have enough scoliosis to keep him out of West Point. So that was when I think he was maybe 17 at the time, and this was back in 1897, and he may have still been growing, he might not have still been growing, but he was able to pass that test, enter West Point, and he's one of the most decorated generals we've had in the U.S. So that's kind of not a short history. His history is pretty amazing if you want to read the whole book, but pretty inspiring that he was able to go from being denied entry to West Point because of scoliosis to getting to the point 2 years later where he didn't have enough scoliosis to keep him out. Again, I don't have x-rays to know what degree that was or how improved he was able to get it. So now let's get into the 3 things that I learned from this story. Okay, number one is something that I think all patients with scoliosis who are looking to get treatment should know, is the why behind their treatment. Why are you looking for treatment? Why are you looking to do the Schroth method? Why are you looking to do something about your scoliosis? Is it because you have back pain and you don't want to have back pain in the future? Is it because you want it to stop it progressing? Is it because you don't want to have surgery? Is it because you don't like the look of it and you want to change how prominent your scoliosis is and what people can see? Is it, there are a lot of different whys, but why is your specific why? What is your specific why? Why do you want to receive treatment for scoliosis? Think about that. With General MacArthur, it was that he wanted to get into West Point. He didn't have pain from scoliosis. He didn't even know it was there until he did that screen before he went in. But his why was he wanted to reduce it so that he could pass the physical examination. And that desire was really strong, and it drove the other 2 points that I'm going to make. But you need to know the why behind why you're getting treatment, or it's going to fail. You won't have the motivation to continue with treatment. And so find that why. So that's number one. Number two is being consistent. If you think about his story, after he learned the exercises, he was consistent. He was doing these daily. He was doing these exercises very consistently, and he saw the results because of that consistency. If he had learned the exercises, worked with a doctor for a week or 2 weeks or a month, and then stopped doing them and expected things to change, I don't think they would have changed as much. So he was very consistent and motivated in doing them. So that's the key, number 2. The most important one, in my opinion, is the number 3. Number 3 is that he worked with someone who was specialized in scoliosis and treated his specific curve. I think that's more important initially than the other things, because if you're not treating the curve individually in that specific person, it doesn't really matter what exercises you're doing. They may not be specific enough to actually make the changes that you're looking for. And even though you have a strong why behind why you're doing it, if you're not doing the right exercises, then you probably aren't going to have the result you want. So I think number 3 is the most important. Make sure you're working with someone who's specialized in scoliosis, knows what they're doing, and is tailoring a program specific to your curve. I think that cannot be overemphasized. I see it every day when I have a new patient in the clinic who has scoliosis and they've progressed to like 35 degrees or something. And I ask them what they've done in the past, if they've done physical therapy. And they say, a lot of times, yeah, I've done physical therapy. And then I ask what they did. And most of the time, it's just core strengthening, it's just stretching. It's nothing specific to that curve. And it makes me realize that who they were working with wasn't really tailoring those exercises specific to that curve. And to really do that, to be fair, you have to be trained in a technique to treat scoliosis, like the Schroth method or like the C's approach or one of the PSSE methods that are out there. If you're not evaluated as an individual and as an individual curve, and people are just throwing exercises at you, I don't think that you're going to get the results that you want. It's amazing to me, actually, back in 1897, when General MacArthur was going through this, that he found someone that really kind of dug deep into this. This Dr. Pfister, I wish I knew more about him, because it sounds like it was very effective, and I wonder what he was doing. But he was treating it specific to General MacArthur's back. And I think that is a huge key to treating scoliosis. So his story is pretty amazing. General MacArthur's story is awesome. I would recommend, if you want to look into, an inspiring story, especially a military story, his is a good one. But we do learn those 3 things from this. And hopefully that was helpful, and you can take those and you can improve your scoliosis as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.